if you do get it wrong, unfortunately, it can be disastrous. But equally, if you get it right, then it makes your life a whole lot easier because you've got a partner there that you can rely on and trust, and that's the whole benefit of outsourcing in the first place.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CX Law with me, David Dumgay. Today I have a very special guest, another David Neal, founder and CEO of GBPO Solutions. Welcome to the show, David. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Fantastic. So we're going to be talking all things BPO today. But before we get into that conversation, do you want to give us a bit of a introduction to yourself and the business? You can, share a little bit around maybe your history of working in and around this fascinating space.
Yes, thank you. So I've been in the industry now what feels like forever. It's definitely over 20 years anyway. So I started very much on the client side, so procuring BPO services, mainly in the utilities sector, nearshore, offshore, before I made the leap and moved to the other side and then ran and looked to build BPOs internationally. So on the client side for a long period of time and then moved on to the BPO side.
Wow. And I mean, it's that time in industry on both sides, I guess, that's really kind of shaped what you're doing now at GBPO. But I'd like to maybe concentrate on some of those key moments, some of those biggest disappointments or gaps between what BPOs promised and what they actually delivered that kind of led to the formation of your business.
Great. Yeah. I mean, there's not many people that you meet or that I meet anyway that have worked both sides of the coin, moving client side to the BPO side. And that's been quite enlightening, I guess, of going to market as a client and trying to navigate the complexities of all the BPOs that are out there. There's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of BPOs, all claiming that they're the ideal match for you. And as I say, when I moved to the BPO side, I was one of those BPOs saying that I was the ideal match for the client. But that's led to, I guess, an enlightenment of understanding the complexities on the buyer side to ensure that there is something in place that can give them confidence that when a BPO is saying they are the ideal partner, they truly are. And up until May this year, there wasn't anything in the industry that could confirm the claims of what that BPO was putting to market as a proposition. So we launched GBPO and the first world's dedicated BPO accreditation to give clients confidence to say when they see that accreditation, they can take confidence that that BPO is authentically presenting themselves and what they are saying is the truth.
Yeah, I think we'll dive into the accreditation element in a moment, but I want to take a step back and to maybe look at that process. It is a traditional process for a market that is actually quite innovative, especially with the use of technology. So it's a bit of a juxtaposition there. But what does the typical BPO selection process look like today, and why is it not really made that sort of leap in innovation or changed much since the 90s or when you worked kind of in industry? And what has really prevented it evolving in the same ways we've seen in other markets?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the tagline of the organization is "Let's BPO differently" because I wanted to find a different way to find those partnerships and inform those decisions. So, historically, even back to the late '90s, early 2000s, I guess, when BPO was forging itself as a professional industry, you would identify maybe one or two, three, four, five BPOs that you thought were a good match. Maybe they approached you, maybe you found them online, maybe there was a broker involved. You would then ask them a series of questions of what you hoped were the right questions, such as what's your attrition and do you have capabilities of X or Y. They provided the answers, you studied them, you maybe interrogated them a little bit, and then you ultimately took their word that what they were presenting is truth and made your best guess. And it came to mind, not to loop it back to the accreditation, but it came to mind that there is no other major purchasing decision that you make that way. You don't buy a house based on what the estate agent says or buy a car from what the man on the forecourt says. You check out the service history or you get a survey done. And so the the decision around which BPO partner you choose, in truth, hasn't really changed in 20 years until, as I say, May of this year, where we've now got the accreditation as a comfort to say there is a different way that you can select a BPO partner.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of some of the claims I see in the technology sector space where people claim they've got certain functionality, and you find out it's on a roadmap to be done in the next 12 months. It's not actually quite there yet. You don't find that out obviously until after you've signed the contract. So this is incredibly important. And and going back to what you said, if a BPO says, my attrition rate is 5%, or I do have these capabilities in speech analytics, or, I'm ISO certified, but how often are you seeing these claims actually like true or false, or verified during the selection process? Is anyone actually doing that right now, or is this purely part of the accreditation only kind of thing that you're doing?
Yeah, so the accreditation is the first of its type. So up to this point, it was in good faith. You might, through your own due diligence, ask to see a ISO certificate or ask to be seen the workings of the the attrition rate. But in reality, most of it is acted in good faith. So if they are presenting, they have speech analytics capability, unless you're asking for a demo and going through the process and really testing that with the expertise yourself, it's very difficult to know. And sometimes from the buyer, it's not always clear the questions that you should be asking. So if your core business is utilities or retail, your expertise not necessarily isn't in outsourcing and BPO. So there might be some questions there that aren't realized or asked in the process itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a risk, really, if you haven't got that support around you when you're going through this. I mean, what are some of those risks? I mean, you've been around, you've seen this in action, which has led you to where you are today. But what are the risks on partnering with a BPO based on what they've been told in a presentation, or an RFP, and what have you seen go wrong in during this sort of process? I mean, you've seen both sides of this now, and interesting what you've seen around that kind of risk element, and what could actually fall over, or not happen as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean it can all go wrong. Unfortunately, as a business, you are entrusting that BPO with your brand, your reputation, your share price, potentially your own personal job. You're entrusting them with your most valuable asset, which is your customers and your reputation, and whether or not that be that customers are dissatisfied because of the service levels, in which case they decide not to renew, or whether or not that's a data leak or a cyber attack or whatever it may be. The appointment of a BPO is far more important, in my opinion, than hiring a COO or hiring a director of service, because the influence that they can make can be dealt with relatively quickly with a change of position. When you partner with a BPO, it is a long process in that partnership. So, if you transition 20-30% of your service estate, you can't turn it off on a Friday and open it up somewhere else on a Monday, the same as maybe you can replace a person within your organization. So if you do get it wrong, unfortunately, it can be disastrous. But equally, if you get it right, then it makes your life a whole lot easier, because you've got a partner there that you can rely on and trust, and that's the whole benefit of outsourcing in the first place.
Yeah, and of course, companies like yourself and other consultants, etc., and brokers, they do play a really important part in this selection process. But what should customers really understand? Before interacting with a intermediary, what should they understand about maybe how they're compensated, how they do things, how they make deals, and why does that matter?
Yeah, and I think that's a fundamental difference between our business and what would be a traditional broker or intermediary or introducer model, is that they can absolutely help navigate the market. So they can suggest geographies or particular BPOs, and they can help you run the RFP process. But the commercial models that they work to, more often than not, is a percentage of revenue. So the question I often ask is, how can they have your best commercial interests in mind if the more you pay, the more that they earn? And can you be confident and sure that they're only pointing you to the right BPO, and not the BPO that's paying them the most amount of commission? And going back to your point around what can go wrong, I think sometimes what can go wrong is that there is a ideal BPO to the left that isn't paying them commission, but there's a not so ideal BPO to the right, that is the temptation is as a broker or an intermediary is to say, actually, let me point you here to the right because I earn a bit of money from that, and if I point you to the left, I earn much less. So my model is to break through that by saying, actually, there isn't any commission that we receive from the BPO that you choose. So we don't necessarily care which geography you choose, whether or not that's onshore, offshore, whether or not it's a commercial model that's based on risk, whether or not it's an hourly rate, the price that you pay, none of that really materially matters to us because we're not commercially incentivized. We don't receive any commission from the partners that we place them with. So that's really the core difference between the traditional broker and intermediary model and what we're trying to achieve, which is actually we just want you to find an ideal partner that's accredited that you can trust, not necessarily who's going to pay us the most amount of money to speak on their behalf in terms of why they're ideal.
Okay, maybe let's delve into a little bit more around framework specifically. You know, you've built a framework around is it four key pillars: people, process, policy, and technology, I believe. Maybe you could break down each of those areas. And you mentioned earlier why asking the right questions is so important. But you know, what questions should customers be asking around those four kind of core pillars you've got?
Yeah, so the framework has been built, I guess, from all the experience that I had as a client going to market and asking the right questions or the wrong questions and understanding what are the specific questions that you really need to get to grips with to inform your decision. But equally, all the RFPs and RFIs that I've answered on the BPO side, and the best way to frame those answers back. And that's why it's categorized really into those four core areas, which really are the four areas that when you're selecting a partner, you should be digging into. So it's all encompassing and is designed to be um, the best example I can give is that it's almost like a car MOT. So if they say they're ISO, are they really ISO? Let's see their certificate. If they say they've got a disaster recovery plan, let's see the disaster recovery plan. If they say their attrition is 5%, let's see how they come into that calculation. Are they taking out internal moves? Are they not including people in training? So only when we're confident that what they're presenting is authentic and reflects reality. So if they say they've got a disaster recovery plan, we've seen it and we can sign off on it, do they get the accreditation badge? So it's covered in those four areas, those four pillars.
Fantastic. Well, let's maybe go through the accreditation sort of process a little bit. I mean, there are other things in the market, but not quite in the same way as this. This feels like a kind of a first proper BPO accreditation. Can you explain, exactly how it works, how a company would interact, and the process? Uh, Maybe a bit around why it's different as well.
Do you mean for the client or the BPO or both?
For for the BPO accreditation, let's go through that, and then we'll go through the client.
So if the BPO wants to be accredited, obviously we go through the framework. They have to, as I say, provide the evidence of the things that they submit. So if they're not declaring that they've got a disaster recovery plan and they're honest about that, then I don't need to see the evidence of that because that's not true. If they're declaring it, then obviously that needs to be seen and signed off. So the process can be as quick as 2 weeks, depending on the accuracy of the information they present, or it can take many months, depending on how much certainty we need to dig into and ultimately how engaged and forthcoming or potentially how mature they are as a business. It's not designed to be overly erroneous in terms of going through their financial results or to completely wipe out the need of an RFP or a client to ask questions. It's there to give certainty to say the foundations have been checked, and you can take comfort that this is a good, honest, trustworthy BPO that have been independently validated.
Fantastic. Okay, and let's quickly back to the customer side. How long does it take to realize, you've made a bad BPO decision? You haven't gone with, maybe one of these accredited BPOs. You've taken their word for something and not maybe verified it appropriately. How long does that take to realize you've made that decision, first of all? And then what does unwinding a BPO relationship actually look like in reality?
Great question. So It can be instantaneously. So as you're starting to do the transition, you can very quickly understand that actually the promises that were made on the way in, I'm now seeing a different reality. So you claimed that your attrition was X, and all of a sudden I don't seem to be able to fulfill a training session because we're losing people throughout that process that I wasn't expected to make. Or you said that you had a site in the Philippines ready to go and it was up and running, but in reality, you're now telling me that they're still in the build phase and there still needs to be connectivity and whatever else. So some of the warning signs can be instantaneous. Some of them can be not until they're embedded and they're live and they're ultimately engaging with your customers. And there could be an incident where you come for a site visit and you identify that all the things that you were presented through a live video feed on your MBRs or your QBRs looks quite different behind the camera, and the security around the place isn't quite what you assumed it would be. So the timing of it can be difficult to assess. I think your second question is probably the most important one, which is the mistake of making the wrong partnership choice and being able to unwind it. So when we talk about transition, the transition is recognizing that with any BPO service delivery, there is a speed to competency, whether or not that be for the people that you hire for them to get it to speed, or whether or not that's building out the capabilities of the systems and so on and so forth. So these transitions can take many, many months, or in some instances, depending on the size, can take years. Equally, when you want to unwind that decision, you have to almost go in reverse order. What you can't do is say, this partnership isn't working, we need to now turn off the 200 people that we've got working for us and set up somewhere else on a Monday. You then need to go to market and build out that competency either back in-house or with another BPO partner, and you have dual run, which means that you're paying for this service over here as that winds down, as you're paying for the competency to build up and work here. So it's a very, very costly mistake if you get it wrong.
Yeah, it certainly is. But I mean, David, we've spoken a lot around, some of the risks, some of the advantages of going with an accredited BPO, and what kind of listeners should look out for. If we can kind of take it back a step, and for those people watching now who maybe going through a BPO selection process or thinking about starting one in the next month or two, what if you could pick out from the conversation, what are the three kind of most important things they should do differently based on what we've kind of been speaking about today?
Well, first of all, I hope that they look out for the accreditation badge. So when they see a BPO that's displaying that accreditation badge, they can take confidence that they have been independently assessed by my organization, and therefore what they're presenting is reality. Outside of that, I think that maybe they ask questions around what help that they're getting and the motivations from who they're getting it from. So if they are using a broker or an intermediary, what process are they following, and are they willing to declare what payments and commissions that they're earned? And if it's directly with a BPO and they're not getting any external support, it's really wanting to dig into the questions of what are they being showed and presented, but equally, what are the questions that should lead on from that? And an example would be, um, okay, so you're saying that you have utility expertise, for example, you're showing me logos. Do those logos still work with you, or are they past clients? And if they're past clients, why are they past clients? So equally, what work have you partnered with, but what have you lost, and why? Can I have references of clients existing and past that I could talk to understand why they joined you and maybe why they left you, or maybe they're still with you? And also something quite critical, which I think is often overlooked, which is, what is the experience of the people within the organization that you're partnering with? So you might have clients that I can see have similar verticals or similar geography experience, but who within that organization truly has experience? So I'm a water company, for example, in the UK. Who within that business has any water experience, and where does that come from? So you might have a past client or a current client that hones that experience, but where does that experience sit within the organization? So I've been getting quite curious around what is being presented at face value. If you are going to take that path in your own right, is really digging into the presentations.
Yeah, it is. So, and last but not least, I want to just sort of really hit home this point. You offer free support to clients, but with zero commission from the BPO during this selection process. Um, just take us through, last but not least, what does that involve? Why is the free part significant, and why is the zero commission part significant for those customers as well? Yeah, I think that's an important thing to highlight, I think.
Yeah, so I think the free part initially is important because I recognize that one of the biggest barriers of getting any progression through business is time and money. And if you're willing to say, actually, this is not going to cost you anything, and there isn't any obligation to partner at the end of it, that removes an awful lot of uncertainty. Because actually, if something is for free and there's no obligation, then why wouldn't I want to explore why that's different? So I'm trying to remove that barrier of going to the boardroom and saying, can I have X amount of money to utilize an expert in order to support me? So that's why the free part is important. The no commission bit, I think, is equally or even more so important, which is the trust that I don't have a motivational benefit of who they decide to partner with. They're a better judge of who they like, the competencies that they're looking for, whether or not they want a particular geography, whether or not they're looking for a particular skill set, um, or a particular size BPO. My interest is that they partner with accredited members, so they can take comfort that if they choose left or choose right, there isn't any commission that I receive. So my motivation is pure to find them a solid partner. So those two things combined, I hope, is quite a compelling argument, which is it's not going to cost you anything, and there's no obligation to continue should you decide not to partner with one of the accredited members. But equally, when they do partner with an accredited member, they know that I'm not financially incentivized. And crucially, there's one last point on that. It also means that the BPO can offer a much more attractive commercial proposition because they're not having to add on salespeople commission, they're not having to add on broker commission onto the pricing structure. So in theory, it should also be a much better commercial price that they're able to obtain as well because that commission isn't loaded into the price.
Yeah, it is fantastic, and it is kind of a win-win for all sides in this scenario, which is great to see. And as we know, this space, outsourcing BPOs, it is growing as well. More people will require this kind of assistance, and it's great that you're striving to help people make those right decisions as well. So, David, thank you so much for joining me and sharing some of the insights around the market and what you're doing with GBPO. And I look forward to viewing your journey and our next conversation.
Thank you, David. Great to catch up. Appreciate it.
Very much. Take care.